the wood-paneled chambers of the Boston Federal Courthouse, Judge Raymond Harrington makes no effort to hide his disdain when 29-year-old Karoline Leavitt appears as defense counsel in a high-profile corporate fraud case. "Ms. Leavitt, this isn't a mock trial competition," he remarks with a dismissive chuckle as she presents her pre-trial motions. The seasoned judge, known for his sharp tongue and traditional views, openly questions her readiness to handle such a complex case involving her client, a small business owner accused of financial improprieties. "Your Honor, I assure you I'm well prepared to represent Mr. Reynolds," Karoline responds, her voice steady despite the flush creeping up her neck. Judge Harrington peers over his reading glasses. "Forgive me if I don't share your confidence. The Westbrook financial case involves regulatory statutes that attorneys twice your age struggle to comprehend." The gallery of attorneys waiting for their own hearings exchange knowing glances. Karoline feels their judgment like a physical weight, but straightens her spine. Michael Donovan, a liberal journalist from the Boston Chronicle who's covering the trial, eagerly jots down the judge's condescending remarks, anticipating a quick resolution and an article about inexperienced representation. Young lawyer faces reality check in Harrington's court, he mumbles to himself, already crafting the headline. During the preliminary hearing that follows, Judge Harrington repeatedly interrupts Leavitt's arguments, making sarcastic comments about her youth and suggesting she might be out of her depth. When Karoline cites a recent Supreme Court decision, Harrington waves his hand dismissively. "Ms. Leavitt, are you actually suggesting that Martinez v. Financial Trust applies here? Perhaps you should review the case again before making such creative interpretations." The prosecution team, led by veteran attorney James Winston, exchanges knowing smiles. Winston, with his tailored suit and silver-streaked hair, barely needs to object as the judge does most of the work for him. "Your Honor, we move to exclude defense exhibits C through E on relevance grounds," Winston says smoothly. "Granted," Harrington replies before Karoline can even rise from her chair. Despite the humiliation, Karoline maintains her composure, gripping her leather portfolio a little tighter as she methodically continues presenting her motions. She notices a juror in the back row, an older woman with kind eyes, watching her with unexpected interest. "For the record, Your Honor, I'd like to note my objection," Karoline states clearly, meeting the judge's gaze directly. "Noted," Harrington says with a thin smile. "Though I suggest conserving your energy for battles you might actually win, counselor." Later that evening, alone in her modest apartment, Karoline kicks off her heels and sinks onto her couch. For just a moment, doubt creeps in. Then her phone rings. It's Marcus Reynolds, her client. "Ms. Leavitt, I saw the hearing today. Are you sure you still want to take this case? That judge seems to have it in for you." Karoline's resolve hardens. "Mr. Reynolds, they've underestimated both of us, and that's exactly why we're going to win." After hanging up, she spreads her case notes across her small dining table and begins reviewing each document with renewed determination, knowing the real battle is just beginning. On her laptop screen, Donovan's first article about the case appears, the headline exactly as he'd muttered in court. "Young lawyer faces reality check in Harrington's court." Karoline smiles grimly. They had no idea what was coming. While the courthouse halls buzz with gossip about the inexperienced young lawyer about to face defeat, Karoline works relentlessly behind the scenes. In her small office at the back of a shared legal suite, she pins case documents across an entire wall, connecting them with red string and sticky notes, a visual map of the prosecution's weaknesses. Another late night? asks Terry, her paralegal, bringing in coffee at 9 p.m. Karoline nods, rubbing tired eyes. The Reynolds case isn't just about accounting regulations. It's about corporate bullying. Through a series of flashbacks, we learn about her brilliant academic record, graduating summa cum laude from Boston University Law, her prestigious but grueling clerkship with the First Circuit, and the personal reasons driving her dedication to this particular case. Her own father had lost his small construction company to similar predatory tactics years before. "You don't have to take every underdog case," her mother had warned during their weekly call. "I'm not taking every case, Mom. I'm taking the right ones," Karoline had answered. Her client, Marcus Reynolds, owns a family business falsely accused of fraudulent accounting practices by Westbrook Financial, a larger corporate competitor trying to eliminate competition. Though other attorneys had refused his case due to the powerful opposition, Karoline recognized injustice when she saw it. "Look here," she tells Terry, pointing to financial statements. Westbrook's supposed evidence relies on quarterly reports they pulled out of context. When you look at the annual figures, the discrepancies disappear, Terry finishes, eyes widening. In late-night strategy sessions, Karoline meticulously prepares, analyzing precedents overlooked by the prosecution and uncovering inconsistencies in their evidence. She calls in favors from law school classmates now working at prestigious firms, quietly requesting insights. "You're taking on Charles Winston?" her former study partner exclaims over the phone. "He eats junior attorneys for breakfast." "Then he's due for indigestion," Karoline replies, making a note of a case Winston had lost 5 years earlier. She consults with financial experts and former regulators, developing a defense strategy that challenges the very foundation of the prosecution's case. One night, after 17 straight hours of preparation, she discovers a procedural error in how Westbrook's forensic accountants handled the evidence. Meanwhile, Michael Donovan publishes a scathing article predicting her failure. In the David versus Goliath battle set to unfold next week, he writes, this particular David seems to have forgotten her slingshot. The judge reads the piece over breakfast, reinforcing his preconceptions before the trial begins. He calls a colleague. "Got a young woman in my courtroom who's about to learn some hard lessons." Harrington chuckles. "Shame, really. They send these kids out before they're ready." Unknown to both Donovan and Harrington, Karoline spends her weekend in a mock courtroom she set up in her apartment, practicing responses to every possible objection, refining her opening statement until each word serves a precise purpose. On her refrigerator hangs a simple note. "They expect you to fail. Use that." The night before trial, Reynolds calls in a panic. "Maybe we should settle. Everyone says we can't win." "Mr. Reynolds," Karoline answers calmly, "tomorrow, we start changing the narrative." The courtroom falls silent as Karoline rises for her opening statement. Judge Harrington checks his watch, barely concealing his impatience. The prosecution team sits confidently, Winston leaning back in his chair with the relaxed posture of a man who considers the matter already settled. "Your Honor, members of the jury," Karoline begins, her voice clear and steady. "This case is not about complex financial regulations. It's about truth." Judge Harrington raises an eyebrow, pen poised to interrupt at the first sign of inexperience. But within moments, the atmosphere shifts. Karoline delivers a masterful opening argument, weaving together complex financial regulations, corporate law precedents, and a compelling narrative that humanizes her client while exposing the predatory practices of his accusers. When Westbrook Financial examined Reynolds Enterprises' books, they weren't looking for compliance. They were looking for a way to eliminate competition. She gestures to her client. Mr. Reynolds represents what Westbrook fears most: local businesses that actually serve their communities. Her command of the material is flawless, her delivery confident yet humble. The jury members, initially skeptical, begin nodding along with her arguments. A young man in the back row leans forward, fully engaged. An elderly woman squints at Winston, reassessing the case in real time. Judge Harrington's expression gradually shifts from condescension to surprise. He finds himself setting down his pen, engaged by her unexpected expertise. When she cites 3 precedent cases in rapid succession, each directly on point, he straightens in his chair. In conclusion, Karoline says, making eye contact with each juror, the evidence will show that Reynolds Enterprises operated within both the letter and spirit of the law. The only fraud in this courtroom is the case against them. Winston rises for the prosecution's opening, visibly recalibrating his approach. His usual folksy charm seems rehearsed compared to Karoline's authentic presentation. When he overstates a regulatory requirement, Karoline makes a single note on her legal pad. Judge Harrington notices the movement, then the error. When the prosecution presents their first witness, a forensic accountant from Westbrook, Karoline's cross-examination reveals critical weaknesses in their case. "Mr. Branson," she asks, approaching the witness stand with a document, "can you confirm that your analysis only examined quarterly reports?" "Yes, that's standard procedure." "And did you review the annual reconciliation statements before concluding fraud had occurred?" The witness shifts uncomfortably. "Those weren't relevant to our investigation." "Not relevant?" Karoline's tone conveys polite disbelief. "Your Honor, permission to approach the witness?" Judge Harrington, who had been ready to interject with corrections, finds himself nodding. "Granted." Her questions are precise and devastating, forcing the witness to acknowledge key facts that support her client's innocence. By day's end, the whispers in the courtroom have changed tone completely. During a brief recess, Winston approaches her. "Impressive start, counselor, but beginner's luck runs out." Karoline smiles. "I don't believe in luck, Mr. Winston. Just preparation." Michael Donovan, watching from the press section, frantically revises notes for tomorrow's article. He catches Judge Harrington studying Karoline with new interest as she consults with her client, the narrative he had expected to write crumbling as Karoline demonstrates legal acumen that rivals attorneys with decades more experience. As the trial progresses into its second week, Karoline's brilliance becomes undeniable. The gallery, once nearly empty, now fills each morning with attorneys eager to watch her performance. Her meticulous preparation allows her to anticipate and counter every prosecution strategy, turning Winston's witnesses into opportunities to strengthen her case. "Ms. Leavitt," Judge Harrington says during a particularly technical discussion of accounting standards, "the court appreciates your thorough research on this matter." The subtle compliment doesn't go unnoticed. Terry, sitting behind the defense table, exchanges a quick smile with Karoline. When the prosecution introduces surprise evidence, emails they claim show Reynolds knowingly misrepresented his finances, Karoline doesn't flinch. "Your Honor," she says, rising calmly, "I move to exclude these documents under Rule 37 for failure to disclose during discovery." She calmly produces precedents limiting admissibility that even Judge Harrington wasn't familiar with. "I'm impressed you had this case ready at hand, Counselor," Harrington admits, reviewing her motion. "I anticipated Mr. Winston might attempt this strategy," she replies. "It's one he's employed in 3 previous cases." Winston's face darkens as the judge sustains her objection. In a pivotal moment during cross-examination of Westbrook's CEO, Karoline presents a complex motion that forces the judge to reconsider his initial legal interpretation. The courtroom watches in stunned silence as she methodically dismantles the prosecution's central argument. "So to summarize, Mr. Daniels," she says to the increasingly uncomfortable CEO, "your company's complaint hinges on accounting practices that your own financial statements employ?" That's different," he stammers. "Different how?" she presses, her tone remaining respectful but relentless. When he cannot answer, the jury's expressions tell the story. Publicly acknowledging her sound reasoning, Judge Harrington sustains her objection against the prosecution's strongest evidence. The court finds Ms. Leavitt's interpretation of Morrison v. Financial Board to be persuasive, he declares. The courtroom buzzes with the reversal. Michael Donovan, who had arrived late after filing a revised article praising Karoline's surprising competence, realizes he's witnessing something truly remarkable. During closing arguments, Winston goes first, his usual confidence diminished, but still attempting to salvage his case. When Karoline's turn comes, she approaches the jury without notes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she begins, "when this trial started, you saw a small business owner accused by powerful interests. What the evidence has shown is not just Mr. Reynolds' innocence, but the lengths to which corporations will go to eliminate competition." She delivers an impassioned plea for justice that moves several jurors to tears. When the jury returns with a not guilty verdict after just 3 hours of deliberation, a spontaneous round of applause breaks out before the judge can call for order. Judge Harrington takes the unusual step of commending her performance publicly from the bench. "Ms. Leavitt," he states for the record, "your preparation, knowledge of the law, and courtroom presence have been exemplary. I confess I misjudged you, and I believe we've all witnessed an exceptional demonstration of legal advocacy today." As Karoline packs her briefcase afterward, Reynolds embraces her, overcome with emotion. "You saved my family's legacy," he whispers. Judge Harrington approaches her privately. "Ms. Leavitt, I owe you an apology." And, he adds, handing her a business card, "the circuit court could use minds like yours. There's a judicial clerkship opening this fall. I hope you'll consider applying." Michael Donovan waits by the door. "Ms. Leavitt, I'd like to request an interview for a feature story on your approach to this case." He hesitates. "And I owe you a retraction." The chapter closes with Karoline stepping outside the courthouse into bright sunshine. She calls her parents, her voice breaking with emotion as she shares her victory, not just for her client, but against the prejudice and assumptions she'd battled throughout her career. "You were right, Dad," she says, tears streaming down her face. "Sometimes the system works, if someone's willing to fight hard enough." Outside the courthouse, Marcus Reynolds stands surrounded by his family, their faces radiant with relief. His business and reputation saved by her unwavering belief in justice. As Karoline watches them, a young female law student approaches her timidly. "Ms. Leavitt, I watched the whole trial. You were amazing." She hesitates. Do you think I could intern with you someday?" Karoline smiles. "What's your name?" "Jennifer." "Well, Jennifer," Karoline says, extending her hand, "let me give you my card. The legal world needs more voices like ours."